Welcome to the podcast recording of Middle East AI News, live for Thursday, October 19th, 2023. Brought to you by Carrington Malin, marketing for an AI-first world. You're listening to my discussion with Dr. Shadab Khan, Director of AI and Applied Science at M42, where we discuss Abu Dhabi headquartered healthcare group M42's new clinical large language model and the future of healthcare.
In today's Middle East AI News Live, we're going to be talking about a big AI announcement from Abu Dhabi, the release of a clinical artificial intelligence model called Med42. I suppose few people knew what a large language model was last year. However, with the arrival of ChatGPT, Bard, Llama, and more recently Falcon and Jace AI models from Abu Dhabi, we've all learnt a lot. But what do LLMs and generative AI mean for healthcare? And we're going to be addressing that in a few moments. Last week, Abu Dhabi-based healthcare group M42 announced a clinical LLM intended for use by doctors, specialists, and patients. It's the best performing specialized healthcare LLM in existence and could become a catalyst for the whole healthcare sector. I'm going to be joined by Dr. Shadab Khan, Director of AI and Applied Science at M42, whose team developed M42's new clinical LLM, Med42. Shadab runs a team of applied scientists and engineers to solve problems in healthcare AI. The clinical LLM, which is called Med42, is just one of the AI R&D projects that he's responsible for. You may be interested to know that Dr. Shadab has been researching AI models and solutions for healthcare problems based in Abu Dhabi for the past 5 years. He holds a Master's of Public Health from Harvard University and a PhD in Engineering Science from Dartmouth College. So, a warm welcome to Dr. Shadab Khan to Middle East AI News Live. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us and telling us more about Med42 and how this AI model could influence the future of healthcare.
Thank you very much, Carrington, for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to be sharing with you the work that the team has done. As you very well described, it's one of the world's best performing open access clinical large language model. And I'd be glad to share more with you on how we developed it and what our vision is.
Excellent. And this is red hot news, isn't it? This was just announced a few days ago, and it's the first model of its quality and standard. M42 is an Abu Dhabi-based global tech-enabled healthcare company, the forefront of medical advancement, transforming lives through innovative clinical solutions that solve the world's most critical health and diagnostic challenges. M42 has over 20,000 employees and more than 450 facilities in 25 countries. It's the first of its kind integrated healthcare company that combines a unique medical and data-centric technologies with state-of-the-art facilities to deliver world-class healthcare. So great to have you here, Shadab, to tell us more about Med42, because there's quite a lot to tell. First of all, I think just from a 1,000-foot view, why is this big news? And what exactly is Med42?
So to answer your first question, Carrington, Med42 is a big news because so far we've seen quite a lot of very promising efforts in clinical large language model space, particularly when it comes to their availability in the open access arena. What we've seen is there have been several models that demonstrated the promise and potential of clinical large language models. They did, however, fall short on several occasions and benchmarks. One particular benchmark that we were interested in is models' performance on a US medical licensing exam, where we noticed that despite significantly larger closed models having cleared what would be considered a passing score of 60%, the open access models, however, had fallen short. And our intent with creating Med42 was again to make sure that researchers and scientists, as well as any AI developers who wanted to build solutions for healthcare, had alternatives to the closed models, had essentially hackable models in their hands to try and build some of these technologies for the world.
Very good point. So the models that are out there that start to fulfill this, enormous potential are behind closed doors and not accessible.
Absolutely. So Med42 is publicly accessible. It's available on Hugging Face for downloads. We've already seen more than 250 downloads so far, and it's one of the top trending models on Hugging Face today.
And you've benchmarked this against other models that are open access, and this outperforms most of them.
That is correct, Carrington. So interestingly, the close second model in our comparison is another model that was built with exactly the same 70 billion parameters. And this particular model was at 54% in a zero-shot evaluation on USMLE. In our assessment, Med42 achieves a score of 72% accuracy on the same benchmark. So that was quite thrilling to see.
Brilliant. In terms of open access clinical LLMs, is there anything on the horizon? Is this a busy field, or is it fairly open at the moment? And this is one of the few opportunities that healthcare professionals and developers have to look at and examine.
Great question. So I think there's plenty of opportunity to innovate and continue to push the boundaries of what's achievable by these open access large language models. So in terms of performance, while we do achieve 72% accuracy, there is a model called GPT-4 by OpenAI, which achieves an even higher score. So commitment from our company is to continue to invest time and effort and resources in building this model that allows people to have alternatives to the closed model.
Great. And in a nutshell, what are we talking about in terms of value? What does this actually do? Because we've all obviously played with ChatGPT and other generative AI apps and experienced what LLMs can do. But in terms of in the medical field and the healthcare field, what are we talking about?
Right. I'll give you a few examples of what value proposition such models bring to the table. So say you're a patient or I'm a patient, right? And we've all been in the situations where we've walked out of a doctor's visit in a hospital with a lab result in hand. And I haven't had any formal training in medicine, so plenty of the keywords that I spot on my lab reports are unfamiliar to me. And I've heard this story from so many friends and family members that this is a pattern that repeats. What are the current alternatives? You might try and get back in touch with your treating physician. Depending on whether or not they have a time, they may give you an answer or an explanation for your lab results mean for you. With Med42, we think such queries could be easily addressed. Med42 provides explanation to short and long form medical questions in an easy to understand language. So that's for the patients. But for physicians, consider for a moment that you're treating a diabetic patient who has, let's say, 15 or 20 odd prior visits in the system. And this patient is in front of you today and you ask a question. When was the last time that this patient had control over their diabetes? Now, that simple question could be assessed by looking at the HbA1c results. And to access the HbA1c results for prior visits, you'll have to go through these 15, 20 page views for each visit record, then find the corresponding lab result, open that lab result, locate the HbA1c entry, and record all of this information in your brain while you try to answer the simple question of when was the last time this patient had an HbA1c in control, let's say under 7.
Right.
Obviously, in the process, you wasted tens of minutes of precious time that could be spent on offering care to other patients or to offer more personalized care to the patient that's in front of you. So we believe with technologies like Med42, we'll bring a lot of value in terms of reducing burnout, reducing the time spent on electronic medical records for the physicians, which would help improve their experience, reduce the administrative burden, and hopefully that leads to happier doctors delivering improved care to the patients.
It sounds great, and it resonates with me because a friend of mine actually in the last couple of days had an MRI scan, and when his results come through, the institution said, come and see us in 2 weeks when the doctor's back from holiday.
Right. That's unfortunate.
Yes, it is. So why is it now? I mean, why has this not happened before? Because it's a simple idea and it's an obvious need that's there from both the patient side and from the healthcare professional side. And I guess the answer is technology.
Right. So technology is a part of it, Carrington. So we've recently seen a surge of interest from many stakeholders in building these large language models. We've all been in awe of the possibilities that these large language models have enabled. And that's why we're seeing so much of an interest now in seeing what value we can bring to the table in healthcare. It's not that there haven't been assistive technologies in healthcare before. It's just that in this recent series of LLM works, the possibilities have been so vastly improved that it warranted another look, at least from our side at M42. And one of the reasons, again, we got involved is because, as you said, we're big. We have more than 450 facilities in 27 different countries across 4 different continents where more than 50 different languages are spoken by our patients as well as the treating physicians, we really needed to make sure that we have access to tools that are truly world-class and that will help us with our own goals at M42.
Right. So that's obvious to me that on a patient level, yeah, I would love to see my results immediately. I would love to have them explained to me, in my own time and my own schedule in a way that, helps me support my own healthcare. Is there a way of summing up what the impact of this technology could be on the healthcare system?
Certainly. So historically in healthcare systems, you come across 4 different problems, right? So first is that we always have to find a way to deliver better care. And how we measure that is in terms of outcomes for the patients, right? If you're a cancer patient, this could mean longer survival once you're diagnosed with your cancer. If you're a diabetic, this could mean that you have stronger control over managing your diabetes for the period in which you have the diabetes. In some other cases, it could even mean that we are able to reverse a particular chronic disease, right? Say hypertension, for example. So that's on the outcomes.
Wow.
But on the other side, we have to focus on improving the experience for patients, improving the experience for physicians, while being able to do so in a sustainable financial environment. WHO projects that there will be a shortage of 10 million healthcare professionals by 2030 across the world. And so there's another angle of the healthcare capacity and the demand not keeping up pace with each other. These technologies, we really think we'd have a chance to deliver stronger care to populations across the world and somehow flatten the health disparities that exist today because of the skill gaps and access to care.
Wow. So it could have potentially enormous impacts on both the ecosystems and on people that need critical care. But there are concerns. There's obviously the legal considerations. There are risks, as we all are aware of, the way that have tended to work. So can you give us a sum up of what those different risks and concerns are?
Certainly. So that's another great question, Carrington. While the large language models do perform very well and Med42 achieves extremely good results on the benchmarks, that's not enough. No technology is perfect, and particularly in healthcare, we have to make sure that any outputs that come from assistive technologies such as Med42 are safe, they are reliable, they're free of any bias, they're free of any misinformation, they don't contain any potential for harm to the end users, that they operate within the ethical boundaries within which they were supposed to build. And so we've placed several guardrails in the model's output to make sure that the output, again, is safe for the end users. If you're a patient, the model tends to produce a result that would provide general healthcare information, but steer clear of offering any diagnosis or a prescription. It would instead suggest that you consult with a trained medical professional.
Right.
So while it tries to help, it also defers to the experts where it should. On the side of making sure that the technology remains safe, we are launching several research studies with the physician scientists in our M42 network to make sure that the outputs are fit for purpose.
Great, makes sense. Just to zoom in a little bit on Med42, what was involved in building Med42 and how long did that take and what are the technologies involved?
So to build Med42, we began with putting together a data set first. We used several publicly available sources of question and answer type data sets. We curated the data set, we cleaned the data set, and then finally we took Llama 270 billion parameter as a base model. And then we fine-tuned that model on our data set over a period of 5 days on a supercomputer called Condor Galaxy 1 with our sister company Core42 and our partner Cerebrus based in the US. The model was trained for 5 days, and then finally to assess its performance, we picked several healthcare specific benchmarks such as MMLU, MedMCQA, USMLE, among others. These tests included model's ability to recall facts and reason in providing its responses for short and long form healthcare questions. In evaluations, we found that the model outperforms all publicly available open access clinical large language models. On the USMLE, I did previously mention that it's one of the only models that crosses the passing score of 60%, currently standing at 72%. It also outperforms larger closed models such as GPT 3.5 and Cloud from Anthropic, the company that recently received $4 billion of investment from Amazon, behind only GPT-4 and Google's Med42 at the moment.
Wow. And I think you also managed to shrink the training time required for this model and the huge volume of data that you used.
That is correct. So as I mentioned, we use Kondo Galaxy 1 supercomputer. If I recall correctly, it's a 3 exaflop supercomputer, one of the most powerful purpose-built supercomputer for training AI models by our partners Cerebras and Core42. And it was absolutely delightful working with the Cerebras team and the Core42 team, because we went to them with a request of, hey, can we build this in 2 weeks? They said, sure, we can do it for you in 4 days. And yeah, so Cerebras team scheduled this model training on a Friday night, and then they went off on a long weekend in the US. And then when they came back, they said, hey, your model is finished. And that was it. So yeah, that was quite nice to be able to train this model in just a matter of a few days.
Yeah, it's incredible what's possible now. So the position that it's in at the moment is that it's been released for open access, and that was end of last week. It's out there for review and feedback. What do you expect from that process?
Great question. So the model would remain publicly accessible indefinitely on Hugging Face for anyone to download, test it, fine-tune it further for their applications. Our intention behind making it open access again was, first, we wanted to build while gaining trust from the community. Trust is extremely important in healthcare. We wanted to make sure that our end users understand that we offer transparency when it comes to Med42, which is one of the criticisms leveled at the closed access models. So by putting it out there, we hope to get feedback from the community. We hope to hear from them on what use cases they're finding it good at and where areas for further improvement and growth lies. We hope to hear from them on the safety and reliability of the model's outputs. And ultimately, we have a call for participation, collaboration open to the researchers across the world to come and build Med42 with us. So we hope that some of them are listening and they reach out to us to.
Brilliant. We'll come on to exactly how they would do that and what's involved for institutions and developers who wish to experiment with this and become part of the team, if you like, in a moment. In terms of the review phase, have you got a vision for how long this review phase will be? And then what would be the phase after this?
We're beginning with the safety and reliability studies first, because M42 has been a caregiving organization for the past 15 years. So we understand that we need to deliver better care to our patients, but we cannot do it at the expense of safety and reliability of the model outputs. So that is first. That's expected to take between 4 to 6 months to complete. Following that, we do plan to offer Med42 under a closed pilot access to physicians in our network.
Okay, so then when will I get this from my healthcare provider and be able to look up my results?
That's a great question. And we are working on identifying the right channels to provide safe and effective access to Med42 to the end users. We do have to make sure that the guardrails that we have put in place to ensure that the model output is safe for particularly consumer users are working as intended. And therefore, before concluding the safety studies, it's not possible for me to predict that exact time frame, but I would expect at some point next year.
Oh, really? Okay, so it's not so far ahead then.
Well, it could be a year from now, and we'll still be in 2024. So I don't know really.
So let's move on to practically how do people use and test this, and who are the candidates to review and trial this model. So first of all, this is an open access model under a special license. Am I right?
That is correct.
and it's available for use via Hugging Face. Now, for a non-technical person, and let's say for an institution that doesn't have a dedicated AI department, what are my steps to be able to test this and trial this and use it and give you feedback?
I think the options for institutes which do not have a research team or AI developers or data scientists who are familiar with the steps involved in setting up models like Med42 for running them for evaluation are quite limited.
Okay.
They may find that there are other institutes who are willing to collaborate with them, who do bring in that complementary expertise in being able to set up such models. At the moment, as I mentioned, with the safety studies pending, we did not want to enable access to general public at the moment, but that is one of the things we're looking at.
Okay, so from an institutional point of view, you need an AI team of some sort, and presumably not a large AI team because you've done most of the work already. But you would need an AI team to be able to experiment with this and to test it.
That is correct. And I wouldn't even go so far as to say you need an AI team particularly. It could be that you have some software engineers who are well versed with productionizing machine learning models, and they'd be able to set up an environment where you can come in and test Med42.
Great. Okay. And so let's just switch that round. If I'm a developer and I'm looking for opportunities to, future opportunities to develop apps and products on, is this an opportunity for me?
This could be, not at the moment though. So Med42 has been published under a research-only license. As I mentioned that we wanted to take a safety-first approach, and until the safety studies are complete, we did not want to be in a position where Med42 is used to provide commercial solutions to stakeholders within the system of healthcare.
Just experimenting with Med42, might inform your roadmap and what the sort of things that you might want to do in a year or two's time, but it's not something you could build on now.
Right. No, I don't think the intent right now is to enable anything more than research studies with Med42. As I said, we are working on building generation 2 of Med42 model,
right,
which will be more open access. And we're still deliberating on what are the right licensing mechanisms to offer that.
For those institutions and I guess also potentially policymakers, potentially other stakeholders who have the resources to set this up, what's involved practically? And do I need to be worried about costs of using Med42?
Great question. So running Med42 does require GPU-enabled hardware. This can range from a few $1,000s to several tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the sort of performance you want to achieve with your model and how many queries you'll be running on it concurrently. The steps involved would be as follows. So given that we're proposing a research study, you would submit an IRB application to access data sets that you're interested in. This would then be followed by setting up the pipeline to run Med42. You would download the model from Hugging Face. You would download the code bases to productionize it. You would then pass in the questions from your study into the model that you're interested in and record the response. And then you would compare the response with what you were expecting, which could again come from healthcare experts, let's say doctors or nurses or others, depending on the use case on which you were testing. So by comparing model responses to your expectations, you'll say model performs at a certain level, right? So whether it's an accuracy score or something else that you're measuring. Finally, you would draw some conclusions, and that would be the process.
Right. And I guess the thing to emphasize, which we covered earlier, is that this is using your existing data, isn't it? Your existing training data. It's not using live data or data from institutions that experiment with this.
That is correct. We have trained Med42 only on publicly available datasets. And just for the purpose of clarity, no patient-level datasets was involved or used to train Med42.
So where did the datasets come from to train the model then?
So these are again datasets that have come up previously in medical NLP community. These are available on Hugging Face and several other sources. Our contribution was putting together these in a curated form where we looked at which data sets would make sense for building Med42. We then had some of our team members who were previously physicians, so they understand both the medicine as well as the AI space, go through those data sets to identify whether they are fit for purpose, whether they are good data sets to build Med42 on. And this usually looks at things like what diversity is contained within that data. Is the data quality high? Once this data curation and cleaning process was complete, we fed it to build Med42.
Right. And if I'm an institution that's able to take advantage of this and experiment with it, can they call you?
Yes. So we do offer any interested parties to reach out to us at an email address that we've provided on our Hugging Face link. The email address is med42@m42.ae. Feel free to send us an email with any ideas or proposals that you have, and we'll be sure to respond to that.
Great. So to summarize, the license is at no cost. It's an open access license. But to run this, you're going to need some internal technical ability, which might be an AI team or it might be an IT team. And in order to run this, depending on the level that you want to experiment and trial, you'll need to buy a certain amount of compute resource from you. Is that accurate?
So the compute resources they don't have to buy it from us. We're not compute resellers. So
okay.
That could be something as simple as your laptops if they're equipped with the right GPUs and CPUs, or it could be a big and powerful server depending on what performance expectations you have from your model in terms of concurrent queries that you want to execute on the model.
Great. And do you think this might be one of many models, one of a few models?
This is a pretty competitive space right now. We do expect that the community will pick up Med42 and produce their own variants with perhaps competitive performance. And we're really excited to see that. We're really excited to see where these different individuals take the model's performance further. One of the advantages of working with open access communities is different individuals bring in their own viewpoints on how to test, on how to apply the technology. And I'm sure that our efforts would inspire others to, again, draw from publicly available models and data sets and perhaps build the next generation of clinical large language models.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that much of the healthcare sector is going to be enabled by large language models over the next few years because there are so many distinct uses they could be put to.
Right, you're absolutely right. So from helping out in healthcare operations to care delivery to healthcare finance management, right? There are plenty of applications, so many applications from patient perspectives as well, not just explaining medical jargon, but also just being, let's say, a general healthcare information assistant.
Does this have value for the insurance sector?
Yeah, I'd imagine that insurances and underwriters could find several applications for large language models. So one among them could be trying to assess the let's say comorbidity scores and risk scores for the patients in their care. Insurances could also use it to explain the policy documents to the end users better because that policy documents often tend to be long and convoluted to understand. And patients often have simple questions like, is it covered for me or not? What's my copay, right? And that kind of first line responses could be eased with the help of such large language models. And we could see several applications in pre-authorization. So nobody likes filling these pre-authorization forms in healthcare facilities. So preparing pre-authorizations, approving pre-authorizations, another area where we see large language models being applied in the RCM and insurance side of healthcare.
And what about the Med42 specifically?
Right. All of these use cases would be possible with the help of Med42 as well.
And the vision for this, because you've already mentioned that this is accessible to healthcare institutions worldwide to help you shape and fine-tune and move forward. The vision's global, but then that sort of brings in questions related to governance, to the readiness of regulators in different parts of the world to accept this technology in the healthcare space, the differences in privacy laws, across the globe, etc. how much of an obstacle is that going to be? And is it something that you think that is moving quickly, not moving at all, something that's going to happen in the future? Where would you put all of those things?
We don't see these as obstacles, Carrington. I think these are necessary guardrails to ensure that the technology is applied safely and effectively in healthcare, particularly, right? And I am aware that FDA, the European agencies, and others are actively thinking about how to regulate the large language models in healthcare, but there has not yet been a draft guidance that has been put out. So while there are calls for regulating LLMs in healthcare, there's no specific guidance available on how to achieve that yet. On our side, we've set up governance that includes diverse set of stakeholders with expertise in law, medicine, AI, and others to make sure that we take several viewpoints in building safe legal technologies that we offer to the world. All the datasets that we picked up from the public domain, for example, went through not only review by medical experts for ensuring that they were high quality, but also by our legal experts to ensure that we were not infringing upon any copyrights or other applicable laws.
Right. So does that mean that at the end of the day, the usage by institutions is going to be shaped and governed by the regulators in the various countries that it might be used in?
I think it's hard not to imagine that these would remain unregulated, right? As we are all aware that there are several large language models that are publicly available, ChatGPT being one example of them. And these are being used actively by patients, by physicians, and others as well. So I do see that at some point, the regulators would want to step in and draw the lines on what's acceptable and what's not. I don't know how that's going to play out. It'll be interesting to see.
Question is whether that would mean that the UAE would naturally be the first place that this could become available, because you're closer to regulators and because the regulators are quite agile these days in creating new legislation.
Right. We do work very closely with the Department of Health in Abu Dhabi and other regulators in the UAE. We do have active discussions on how to safely introduce M42 in Abu Dhabi, and we'll have more to say on that very, very soon, hopefully within the next week. Abu Dhabi is an interesting place to try such technologies, given the large diversity of patients and physicians it brings in from almost 200 countries across the world. And I think you're absolutely right. The regulators here are fairly agile, so I do think they'd be in a position to be trendsetters on how to regulate such large language models by accumulating experience ahead of many other countries.
What about the type of data that this will ultimately access? Right. Where do you draw the line on what data is going to be non-patient data that's going to be used, anonymized patient data that's going to be used, other types of data that might be used? How do you think that will progress?
We see several mechanisms for softwares and technology-driven products to access healthcare datasets today. For example, electronic medical records are a form of software that store the patient level data along with the personal identifying information. And these EMR systems do connect to population health management systems and other software programs via protocols such as FHIR for data exchange to deliver, again, additional use cases, right? So we think that in a similar manner, large language models could be seen as another software tool that, with the right permissions and authentications set in, could access patient level data as well in order to deliver the value. One such use case where this could apply would be summarizing the patient's medical history. So say you're a patient with a history of cardiovascular disease, but you show up in the clinic with a broken hand, right? Now, clearly for such a case, the patient history that is generated has to be relevant for that visit to potentially an orthopedic doctor. And to be able to create this fit-for-purpose summary, the LLM would need access to the patient's prior medical records. But there could be, again, additional safety concerns that apply. For example, we could see that the regulators and healthcare operators require the LLMs to be available within the safety parameters of their healthcare IT systems, that is via an on-prem deployment or on local cloud deployment. Fortunately, though, Med42 is a model that can be deployed on-premise, on local cloud, which is one of the key distinctions from the closed models. So I think even if researchers were interested in building models with patient-level data, they'd be able to do so in a safe and effective manner.
Could that potentially include DNA?
At the moment, Med42 accepts only text format data. So DNA, no. So you could ask it a question on presence of particular variants in your genome reports, and it does understand genetics, so it would respond to you, but it's not able to accept, let's say, the genomics datasets using FASTQ or VCF file formats and be able to use those to provide any additional insights.
Abu Dhabi's healthcare ecosystem has been making great advances in the last few years, and it's created a information health exchange, 𝘍𝘍𝘬, that's pulled together millions of patient records from across the Emirate. And so it's really an ecosystem that's ripe for innovation, isn't it?
It is, and we're very fortunate to be in this ecosystem because you rightly pointed out the country's leadership made decisions to invest in setting up the right infrastructure. So you have 𝘍𝘍𝘬, which is the health information exchange, again operated by M42, where all healthcare providers within Abu Dhabi share health records. And so as a result, any physician has access to my health records from any hospitals that I go to. And having the centralized repository, again, enables great applications, right? So this is a great place to be, to build new technologies and innovate and see them apply by offering these technologies as on top of the existing infrastructure such as 𝘍𝘍𝘬.
And is the broad vision, you think, to link all of these technologies up in order that patients have a seamless experience and they can access their records, they can question tools like Med42, they can use digital services, and it will all be provisioned in a seamless manner, and the same for the healthcare professionals on the other side?
So as developers of the technology, we would love to support such an application of Med42 at 𝘍𝘍𝘬 level or in other settings where it provides the necessary insights from the data sets. However, 𝘍𝘍𝘬 is operated by the Department of Health. So if there is any interest from the government stakeholders, we're very open to engaging them to discuss safe applications of Med42 in such settings.
Are there any other LLMs in the pipeline?
This is indeed first of many. We have 3 other foundation models in works for genomics, imaging, electronic health records, and other modalities. Eventually, our vision is to build these library of foundation models so we can utilize any healthcare data modality to build applications that are useful for many stakeholders, whether they're from pharma, patients, providers, insurers, regulators, or others.
Great. Well, we're almost out of time. But I'd just like to go back to one question I've got from the audience, which was related to collaborations with healthcare institutions. You've obviously got a great number of healthcare institutions under the M42 umbrella. Are there institutions outside of that you've already started to talk to about Med42, or is it early days?
We have active conversations, but it is right to call these early days for conversations outside of the M42 network. Yeah, because the LLM was announced, I think, a week ago at this point. So while we've received several inquiries and interest, it's too early to call those out.
Any final comments before we round off?
I think my final comment is simply that I'm really excited to be at M42. It is truly one of a kind healthcare players across the globe where we not only build technology, but we also have means of getting feedback, applying the technology to see the actual utility offered by such models, and then finally to scale it out and offer it to the rest of the world. So I'm consider myself very fortunate to be here, and I'm really looking forward to building these groundbreaking new tools and put them in the hands of practicing physicians and patients across the world.
Brilliant. Exciting stuff. Shadab, thank you so much for joining me today. I learned a lot. I've been talking to Dr. Shadab Khan, Director of AI and Applied Science at M42.
You've been listening to a recording of Middle East AI News Live for Thursday, October 19th, 2023, brought to you by Carrington Malin. Thanks for listening.